Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at USAGlobalTV.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and happy Thanksgiving to those who are celebrating in the States. To me, Thanksgiving is every day. I'm Dr. Jacalyn KERBECK, and I am filling in for my dear friend, Mr. Red O'Laughlin, here on USA Global TV and Radio. Our show is The Wise Ones. So a big hello to Mickey Mickelson. Thank you so much for your partnership and collaboration. We have another outstanding person waiting backstage to come out, one of Mickey's clients from Creative Edge. And our guest today is Don Sawyer. Don is an author and also an educator, originally from Michigan and now in Canada. And he's written a number of books. Today, we're going to be talking about the latest one that's available because there's another one coming right around the corner. It's The Burning Gem. Let's bring out Don and hear what he has to say. Welcome, Don.
Hi, Jacalyn. How are you today?
Hi, I'm fantastic. It's a pleasure to see you and meet you. And we had a brief chat backstage, so I'm excited for this particular episode. Let's talk a little bit about the latest book that you have that's available, because you mentioned there's another one coming around the corner.
Yeah, there's a sequel to it. But the book that brought out this May by Castlegate is called The Burning Gem. I'll just hold up the cover here so we get a good visual of it. It's an urban fantasy book. It's the first I've done in this. I've had 12, 14 books published in a whole bunch of different genres, but this is the first foray into urban fantasy. And I'm really, really excited about it. It's besides being what I think is an exciting adventure, it also, I think, it actually has some social commentary on it. And I think it also offers hope. And also raises some important questions that I think we need to address.
Thank you, Don. We were chatting backstage about a collaboration that you have created with another individual as a result of a podcast on a different platform. And I'm so supportive of that. That's what we do here as well. And so I'd like you to share a little bit about that collaboration, because it has an impact on the work that you're doing and on being someone who is really humanitarian and pro people working together.
Pro people, yeah. In fact, I've worked one of the great privileges of work. I'm retired now. I've been able to work all over the world, particularly in West Africa, but also in Jamaica and other places. And, I think when you have that rich international experience, you realize that as humanity, as human beings, as a single species, we have a lot more in common than we have really that divides us. And that really came home to me again and again and again. And so I find it quite frustrating when we still seem to be, we are, I think, responding to our instincts to return to our tribes where it's secure. We know all the rules and we feel comfortable there. But I think it's time that we learn that we have to transcend those tribal boundaries and begin to figure out how we're going to work together in this kind of this salad of international cultures and ways of being in the world. I think those ways of being in the world all have something to contribute. I think that's part of the problem, is that we look on the other as sort of faintly not just alien, but maybe even antagonistic. And certainly that probably makes sense over the course of 1,000,000 years of evolution. There was I heard I think he was a Canadian sociologist, and he was talking about how those tribes that saw strangers and said, "Oh, look, new friends, let's have them over for dinner." Well, those people probably aren't in the gene pool anymore. So, in some distant past, you can see how those instincts to fear the other might have made sense. But now, at this point, at this juncture in our development as human beings, we need all hands on deck, and we need to really begin to think and work together. So anyway, I was talking to a podcast host in South Africa, Kino Isaac, and we got to talking over the course of the interview, which went on for quite some time, about how we transcend tribalism and how we begin to find ways of not only being together, and I don't even like that term, tolerate each other. We need to really find ways of caring and loving each other and collaborating with each other. Anyway, what came out of that was a decision to create a forum of people who are going to be on Kino's show, and it's going to be on how we find ways of being together and working together. A kind of a global forum. How do we transcend our instincts to tribalism and work toward creating a meta tribe? What one guy I've been reading, a guy named David Sampson, who wrote Our Tribal Future. He says we need not only to have a meta tribe, but what he calls team human. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about. How do we create team human, given all of the obstacles and all of the factors that seem to be pushing us apart rather than bringing us together. So that's kind of where we are on that one.
Thank you, Don. And I know you had a poem you wanted to share with us.
Yeah, and I think the poem, I was funny, I've come across this lately. I mean, I know Langston Hughes, hopefully, most of your listeners will. Of course, he was a well-known Black poet, part of the Harlem Renaissance. And this is a simple poem, but I think it gets right to the heart of the matter. And it's called Waiting. And he says, I'm so tired of waiting, aren't you? For the world to become good and beautiful and kind. Let us take a knife and cut the world in two and see what worms are eating at the rind. And I think that's kind of where we are, It's like, I think we're tired of waiting. I think we're apprehensive. I think we know there's something wrong, but we're having a hard time putting our fingers on it. So I think that idea of looking at what's eating at the rind, and I hope my book does that in an enjoyable, entertaining way. But I think also just on a basis of our discussion, what is eating at the rind? And of course, I mean, what do we find? What we're going to find? What are those issues that are militating against a world that's good and beautiful and kind? In that, I thought, this incredibly powerful movie, Don't Look Up, at the end, when the comet is just about ready to plow into Earth, they're sitting at the dinner table, and the main guy says, "We really did have it all, didn't we?" And I think that's very poignant, because we really do. I mean, it's an amazing world, and with the resources we have more equitably distributed, and more honor and respect for each other as individuals and groups, we really could have it all. And so there's something sad about the state of the world, I think, which is unfortunately one that's not new, but is one that is, I think, now critical. It's in critical condition. And so we really do need to find some of these global solutions to these problems that have been certainly bedeviling us for a long time, but now are actually threatening our very existence.
Thank you, Don. You brought up a lot of really important points that if I think more people got engaged and took the time, that would be a first step. I know, just a little segue for myself, I teach a class called Setting Boundaries and Asking Permission. And the purpose of it is for people to realize how much they're judging other people. And so I'd love to have your comment on this, but we had people from all over the world, people who are very well-to-do from different countries. When I say well-to-do, because you have to pay for the course, you have to travel in, so you're getting money from somewhere, maybe you borrowed it, doesn't matter. And in the role plays that we do, where we ask people to give us 15 minutes of their undivided attention to just listen to what we have to say. That's the only role they have. Say yes, that you have the 15 minutes or you don't. In each role play, the participant became much more interested in the issue instead of being a listener. They were judging whatever the issue was. And the issue was just put in as a demonstration for a role play. And it got to the point where one of the participants got so heated up about the issue that she walked out of the room.
Wow.
And it was part of a role play, and she couldn't even see her own behavior. And so there's no judgment, but I think based on what you're doing, what we're talking about, if we start with ourselves and realize that we ourselves are judging other people and constantly giving solutions to people's problems when nobody asked us, people just want someone to listen to them. So where do you think that listening at an elevated level, active listening, where does that play a role in what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I know you're a listening expert, and I think a lot of my ideas have come. I was a communications, graduate at Michigan State, so I learned an awful lot about interpersonal communication and the importance of listening, active listening. And I know you've probably seen all of this data, but if you actively listen, you actually burn more calories than if you're not. Of course, active listening means honestly engaging with what the person is saying rather than preparing what you're about to say. When I was working in Africa and we were training community development workers, which was a wonderful experience, I was working with tremendous African colleagues, and that collaborative effort, I think for me was sort of an indicator of what could be done when people come together and combine their skills and knowledge. But one of the exercises in active listening was that you had to, if we had a conversation, and again, you introduced an issue, didn't really matter what the issue was, but you had, before you spoke, you had to paraphrase what the other person had said, and then it was your turn. Well, that usually lasted about 2 rounds before people were immediately jumping in with their own opinion, because they weren't listening. They were preparing a rebuttal or a response. And I think that goes on all the time. And if we're I think that we're highly attuned to differences. Certainly the research in evolutionary psychology suggests that we have come to a point where we are more attuned to differences than we are to similarities. And as I say, in the history of things, maybe that made sense, but not anymore. And so, it's even like accents, clothes, hairstyles. There's so many things that we probably almost unconsciously reacted. He's not one of us. He's one of them. he's the other, or she's the other. And so that kind of unconscious, instantaneous judgment, I think, goes on all the time. I suspect, we may not be able to completely overcome it, but we can recognize it. We can see it. We can understand that's not fair. I'm not being rational here. This is just a response. This is just an impulse. It makes no sense. And, without even giving a person a chance to see who they are, we make a judgment. This is a true story. My family comes from the South, southern United States, and my first cousin, we were talking one day, and she had a teenage son, and she said, if he brought home a black girl, a black young woman, I wouldn't let her in the house. I said, Sally, you mean without even knowing her, knowing anything about her? And he said, yep. She said, that's the way I was brought up. I just wouldn't do it. I mean, that's the kind of, inbred, culturally reinforced bigotry that I think has got us into this mess. And I've been very, very fortunate to work in a whole lot of different cultural settings with a lot of different folks from a lot of different backgrounds. And man, every one of them has something to offer. Every one of them at their heart, I think, it has goodness. And I mean, that sounds like a cliche, but you just come to understand that people are people all over the world and with something to offer. So anyway, that's what I had to say about listening and not listening.
Thank you, Don. And I definitely agree with what you just shared. And you have traveled the world. I've traveled the world, I don't think as extensively as you, but I remember as a young girl, my parents took me to New York and we were at a restaurant and I was so amazed. There were people from all over speaking different languages and they looked different. And I thought, this is exciting. And when I just went to London, it's so culturally diverse there that I think that that's part of the issue, that we are in our little world and we think the only world that exists is the one that we have. But when you actually do travel and you get to learn other cultures and see people in other countries, it's exciting. What can I learn from you? I love it.
No, I mean, this is the thing. I mean, and I understand that these are complicated issues like immigration, refugees, all of this is complicated and there's a lot going on. And I don't want to minimize that. I mean, having worked in developing countries, I think people need to begin to think about why is it that people are so desperate that they're willing to risk their lives to try to get to somewhere else. And a lot of it has to do with poverty that could be alleviated if on a global basis that we were committed to doing that. And I think, people have to understand that there's a push-pull effect here. There's the push of desperation and hunger and knowing that your child could die of a preventable disease unless you could get him over here. So there's that push, but there's also the pull of, wow, these guys have so much money and so much wealth, and I could just get over there, I'd be really happy. Well, we need, I think, to address that and begin to understand that, if we can more equitably distribute wealth, we can help people in their homes and to find ways of sharing the wealth and the knowledge and the technologies that we have. We're going to find a lot less pressure on people to flee their homes. Nobody wants to do that. One of the guys I worked with in the Gambia, wonderful man. I mean, just incredible guy. Still my best friends. His son died trying to get across the Mediterranean on a boat. I mean, his oldest son. It's every time not every time, most times I talk to him, he mentioned the loss of his son and what that meant to him. These aren't things that people do lightly. If you read the book American Dirt, you know just how desperate people have to be. And it oftentimes has to do with oppressive governments. And unfortunately, we look at ourselves, we've been behind some of those oppressive governments. So what do we do? How do we work on this as a whole, as an international community, 200 countries? We need to find how we work together, not combat each other. And unfortunately, it seems right now when we look around the world, it's just that these tribes that we've developed over a million years or so are still battling it out, not with spears anymore, but with highly sophisticated weapons and possibly even nuclear weapons. We can't afford that. We just can't afford it.
Thank you, Don. And I think also we hurt each other with our words.
Oh boy.
We can start right there with ourselves. I want to segue back to your book and have you share a little bit about the characters in this book. Let's bring up your website. And okay, here we go. So, wow. Look at this. So if you can tell us about the main characters in The Burning Gem, I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, well, The Burning Gem, the whole idea is I've worked a lot in indigenous communities, indigenous or Native Indian communities, Amerindian communities, actually in Canada. But and as you probably know, a lot of the photographers of the 19th century who were trying to capture images of American tribal life before it was destroyed tragically. Guys like Curtis, they would, and they did, fortunately, did preserve many of these wonderful images for us. But many of the people, the tribal people, didn't want their pictures taken because they thought it was stealing part of their soul. And so this is actually called, this is a soul catcher series that I'm writing about. And when you think about it, that kind of makes sense. I mean, you take a picture, but it freezes you in this piece of paper. You'll never be like that again. So how does it do that? So I thought, well, what if you really, that's true. That was true in African groups as well. What if you had a machine that really did extract a piece of your soul and crystallize it into a gem that enhanced your natural tendencies? And so this is the gem. These are the gems. And then we start off with a gem maker who happens to be 110 years old. He's all of the gem makers are orphans who've been, it turns out, by one particularly evil figure, the Mester. They've been recruited at their most desperate times when they were ready to kill themselves. And so they have to sign an agreement not to touch another person, not to divulge their real names, have no relationships other than to make these gems. And they are told who to see and who to make the gems for. And these are influencers, they're sort of up and coming CEOs, they're religious personnel, whoever they sort of direct him to. And so he's been doing this for many, many years. He doesn't really question what he's doing, why he's doing it, how he's doing it. And then he goes to this door and he meets this woman, Barbara, who's captured literally in this loveless marriage with her, a lawyer that she works for, who's, taken advantage of her, is now having an affair. So it's this loveless marriage. And she says, first, when you want to take you want to do a gym for me and for $50,000? And she kind of strangely agrees. And so he does. He makes a gym for her. And that gym sort of awakens in her a sense of independence. It strengthens her tendencies toward, as she points out, that her fiery nature and her desire. So she senses that this is a door out of this horrible situation she's in. So she tracks this. I won't go through all the details, but she tracks this gym maker down by going through the tunnels, having to walk through the tunnels of the New York subway, and finds him in this very mysterious building attached to this ancient, very well, and it's true, by the way, this place really was built in the 1850s and 60s. There was an attempt to build a subway in New York by a private fund, and they dug this enormous station terminus underneath New York, and then in the crash of 1880, the whole thing was abandoned. So this gigantic abandoned subway station is still underground. Well, in my story, people begin to filter into this, and they make it into a sort of utopian community that attracts. It's a refuge for people who are different, people who bring old knowledge, old ways, that maybe people with skills that people would maybe interpret as magic. But it's a community where people come together with all kinds of differences and build a sort of they literally build it, and it's tiled, and in fact, two physicists that were part of the Manhattan Project come and build an artificial sun for them. So this syndicalist organization begins to grow with people from all over the world, but bringing their special skills and knowledge. So you can see the allegorical aspects of this. Well, this is where they stumble into it. I mean, the guy, the gym maker is already part of it, but she stumbles into this. And, my God, you know. And then so as she begins to get a better sense of it, and the two of them begin to develop trust and a relationship. And of course, he breaks his contract, right? So immediately the master is after him and sends his enforcer after him. And they realize that this whole thing is part of a much larger cabal, a much larger evil force that is affecting the entire world. And so they take it on. These two sort of lost souls take it on, and over the course of the book, they grow stronger individually and collectively, and they have a direct conflict with the master, which I think ends up pretty exciting. Does that give you an idea?
Yes, absolutely. And I was wondering, how much research did you have to do? It sounds extensive.
It's funny you mention that, because I mean, I've never done a book like this before. Because I researched gyms, waves, all kind of wave technology, because that's part of the whole thing, how this stuff is transmitted to the gym. I did metallurgy, because what drives her is she wants a chain that's unbreakable. So they go to this special jeweler, and she uses metals that nobody else uses. It was funny. At the subway, I spent hours looking at the New York subway system to find different stops, and I'm looking at I was looking for abandoned subway stations, and sure enough, there's an abandoned subway station at City Hall, and it was abandoned I think in the 40s, and it's this incredibly beautiful station, but because it was on a curved track, the new trains couldn't reach it, so it's just been kind of pushed back. So that's part of it. That's this abandoned station. But when I had her walking there, I had to figure out on a map, okay, which station would it take? How long would it take to get from this station to that station? Probably unnecessarily, because I don't think most readers would probably check it out. But I wanted to make it accurate, and I think that's one of the important things about urban fantasy. It needs to be literally right under our feet. Some of the most, the beautiful urban fantasy, it's because it melds our reality with another reality. And like Night Circus, that magnificent book, I just, you are drawn into it because it's just there. It's just in the shadows, and you feel it's real. So to me, the research gave it all, I hope, a sort of modicum of believability. Wow, this could be. And I think that's true of magic and a lot. I mean, we talk about magic in terms of gyms and so forth, but you look at just what we're doing right now with this amazing technology that we have right now. I mean, this would literally have been magic 50 years ago. So it is that idea that we are using a lot of magic in our daily lives, and for good and evil. And in this particular case, what we're following is a group of, and this is very ancient, by the way, this cabal. It goes back thousands of years, because their central message is that there's an elite that's meant to rule, and the rest of us are meant to be ruled. And once you sell that, then people give up. People then defer to power. They defer to wealth. Wealth becomes an indicator of some sort of divine right, the so-called divine right of kings. Now it's a divine right of wealth. And so this is the idea that they sell, that they're selling it in every single way. And so this begins to evolve as they work through this maze of darkness, including what I really enjoyed talking about research. A lot of it's set in Budapest in Hungary, and we were there a few years ago, and it's a remarkable city. And there's a kind of a darkness about it. It's got a very dark history, of course. Having been overrun by every horde there was, including the Nazis, and then the Soviets. It's a sad city, but a remarkable city, beautiful. So anyway, I set part of it in Budapest with the ruin bars, and these were abandoned homes. A lot of them mansions that were abandoned by the Jewish community during World War II. So young people, these things were sitting there. I mean, the Russian or the communist regime wasn't able to refurbish them, or really didn't have any interest in it. So these things just decayed. But then young people would take these things over, kind of squat in them, but made them into these amazing bars with dozens of rooms and lights hanging down and little tables and people in So we went to one and I was just absolutely blown away by it. So that's a kind of research, because I think people have to be able to see what you're seeing. They have to hear what you're hearing. And I think the authenticity makes all the difference. So yeah, it was fun to do the research, and some of it very, very technical, and others of it sort of more experiential.
Well, your passion comes through, and it just goes to show that all that research paid off. Plus, you learned something. You're an educator who continues to educate himself.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. And the whole wave technology thing is something that, I don't understand any of it, but it's the kind of thing that Nikola Tesla was working with. Like, his original idea was to transmit electricity, not through cords, but through the air from tower to tower. Just, it's fascinating stuff. And I think, partly, I really do believe that technology has become so sophisticated that it's beyond most of our comprehension, or only parts of it. And so we kind of just give up. We don't try to understand it, and we oftentimes don't trust people who do understand it, which is unfortunate, because they're the people who are standing on the shoulders of generations before who produced this knowledge.
Thank you, Don. I'm going to ask you a question that's really from left field, but I'm just wondering, with all the work that you're doing about awareness and bringing people together and people committing to working together, what role do you think artificial intelligence plays that's helpful or that's unhelpful in terms of us all coming together?
Boy, that is such a good question. I mean, I'm aware of it every day. I don't mind saying that. It's like, I think it's any technology, any particularly new technology, has capacity for being used for good and for bad. I think that's been the history of technologies. And I think what concerns me, who is in charge of this technology, who owns it, and what is it being used for? So I'm very concerned about it, to be honest with you. I mean, we encountered in a benign way every day. I looked something up the other day, and it was actually for another book I'm working on. It was about Métis environmental principles. And this thing came up with this sort of 4-point, 5-point summary. I said, gee, well, that's kind of neat. And then I noticed it had all been generated by artificial intelligence. So they had just pulled chunks out from, a whole variety of sources and put it there. And I thought, well, and they did have links so you could go and verify it. But it was like, how did they decide what was important and what wasn't? Who made that decision? How was it made? And what? So anyway, it's just a long way of saying that I have no idea. But you think about, like, technologies like and when we went through the Industrial Revolution, the steam engine. Well, who owned the steam engine? More and more, it belonged to the wealthy class, the industrialists, and so it was used to maximize profit. And I can remember, back in the 50s and the 60s, they were saying, well, technology, boy, workers are going to have so much excess time, they're not going to know what to do with it because, all, assembly lines, all of that stuff. But it's not true. We're working longer, and what we're doing is even maximizing profits more for the wealthy. So the technology is neutral, sort of, but the application of it isn't. So I don't know how, again, as a human community, we get a handle on AI and how we use it to benefit us as a whole rather than a few. I think it's a huge issue. I think it kind of goes along with climate change, global poverty, and artificial intelligence. And I mean, if we don't get a handle on it, I think we know how it will be used, and it won't be for the benefit of all. So it's a huge issue. And I mean, like I say, I every time I realize I'm encountering it all the time, and I don't. It just in the last little while, it's been really apparent to me. So I have real concerns about it, and I know that a lot of my friends who are teaching at university levels they're just at wit's end because students are handing in papers that are completely written by AI and they're undetectable. But that's just, in some ways, that's a minor issue. It isn't, and it is. But it's playing out on so many levels, most of which we're not aware of. So it's a good question. I don't know what to say.
I'm right there with you. I just think, especially when it comes to brand ambassadors for businesses, just a quick example, I recently moved a few days ago and there's been some maintenance issues, and I called the number and I was thinking I'd get a human being, but instead I was greeted by a voice that had a name. Hello, my name is. And when I told the voice what my issue was, that the heaters aren't working, the voice told me that's not an emergency. And I said, well, it is an emergency. And then the voice said, if you feel like your life is in danger, then you can call 911, but that is not an emergency. And it started listing what emergencies were. And I said, in my opinion, with the temperature going down, this is an emergency and I'd like to speak to someone, and it wouldn't let me speak to anyone. So
did you know it was an artificial voice at that point, or did you think you were talking to a person?
I thought I was talking to a person. It was so convincing. And then the artificial intelligence thing said to me, you've called in 18 trouble tickets already, and they are, and it recited all of the tickets.
Wow.
And it said, and our team is working on it. I said, no, your team's not working on it. No one's out here. And then the person said, well, it's a holiday coming up. I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. But it's not a human being. So my point being, as we talk today about coming together, that if that's the first face of our business, is that you can't talk to a human and you're being told what's important and what's not important, that's bringing us further apart.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No question about it. And I mean, and that's, I think, a really good example. It's one of those things that on the surface seems like, well, it's not the end of the world, but you magnify that and multiply that out. We're not talking to each other anymore. We're talking to machines. And those machines, just as you saw, were not programmed to be helpful. We're not programmed to be empathetic. We're not programmed to listen to you. In fact, at one point you said, and I said to the person, and then of course, because it was like a person, but it wasn't.
Exactly.
I find that very, very disturbing. And of course, that magnified, and you see three kids walking down the streets and they're all looking at their cell phones. I mean, that's another technology issue. But that separation of individuals instead of finding ways of bringing them, together. There are obviously ways of using artificial intelligence to do it, but the sad part, I think, is it's probably not a major profitable, application. And yes. So how do we find ways of making it, I guess, work for everybody until we recognize that need to come together and work together and share technology and share it for the good of all? I think we're in trouble. And I guess that's kind of the theme of today's discussion.
We are in trouble for sure. And I think also with artificial intelligence is it's at least in the experience that I just had, there was no compassion, there was no empathy. Well, we already have that in the world.
Isn't that the truth?
We don't need robots that are doing the same thing. And I think also by employing artificial intelligence, obviously you're taking away jobs, right? So that's cost savings to the business, but yet people are out of work, and then your clients are disgruntled. I know here in the States, I'm not going to mention any names, but there's a cable company that you could end up screaming into the phone about the cable. So I'm very proud of myself. I no longer scream. I just set aside an hour knowing that it's going to take.
I swear at them.
Yeah, but and that goes also about how we communicate with one another. We get frustrated and we start putting, I say it's fuel in the fire. We start screaming, and then it escalates and escalates instead of just listening. But when we're talking to a robot, sometimes it could be the same feeling as talking to our spouse or significant other. It's like, I wish you could hear me. I wish you would just listen to what I have to say. And I think that's really at the core of everything we're discussing.
I absolutely agree. And I mean, if you start yelling at a voice on a phone, why wouldn't you, that then carries over. That's what they say about anger. Getting angry doesn't dissipate anger. It just rehearses for the next time. So if you're yelling at somebody on the phone, well, what does that mean? You're more prone to yelling at a real person later when you actually find one. I mean, I completely agree with you. Now, having said that, I'm sure as this moves along, they'll develop empathetic robots, who can paraphrase like mad, to, oh, I'm so sorry. It sounds like you're really having difficulty. We here would really like to help you. Can you tell me a bit more about your problem? And then of course you start to, and then of course you realize there is no real empathy there. There's no capacity for empathy. That's human. That's essentially human. And as we lose that, it's worrying, very, very worrying.
Yes, I feel like it also comes down to that passive aggressive behavior where someone acts like they really care, but in the meantime, there's really a hidden agenda. So
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely. I don't know. I remember that there was a longitudinal study that was done at the University of Michigan, and basically what they had been looking at empathy levels for a long time, like for 40, 50 years. And at about the year 2000, empathy levels just dropped like a stone. And when they started looking into it, it was because, at least that was their attribution, that they were so dependent now on using social media, cell phones and that kind of thing, that they weren't able to pick up on facial expressions anymore and the emotions that those conveyed. And so the ability to understand what someone was really feeling was atrophied. And so, I think that's happening more and more. And as you say, with this kind of situation, so again, we've got to address those issues. We've got to, I'm going for team human here.
Don, it has been an absolute pleasure. I seriously have really enjoyed meeting you.
I really enjoyed talking with you too, Jacalyn. I really did.
Well, you have to come back on more of our shows. We've got 56 different shows, so I hope you'll come back and see us. But
I can fit into one of them. I've got a sequel coming out, remember, next May.
Fantastic.
Tunnels of Buddha. It's really exciting.
Yeah, I love the work that you're doing. And I just want to share, this is on Amazon. And obviously, for those just joining, maybe you're listening on a podcast platform, Don Sawyer is a best-selling author. And we're talking today about The Burning Gem, which is available on Amazon. Is it available other places as well?
Oh, yeah. I saw somebody the other day at your favorite online book outlet. Yeah. So, Indigo or any of those, they've all got them.
Fantastic. Well, what would you like to leave our audience with?
You can order through my website, just donsawyer.org.
Let's bring up your website. Sorry, I think we lost you for just a second there. Okay, here is your website. Yeah. It's donsawyer.org, O-R-G.
Now that's pretty straightforward, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And
Don, what insights could you share with our audience as we close out today?
What insight?
Team human.
Well, I think just as people are celebrating Thanksgiving today in the States. In Canada, we're more sensible. We celebrate it in October when there's a real harvest, but that's beside the point. And I just want people to think about it. I saw a cartoon today where everybody was sitting around holding hands and thanking, as they should, and then it shifted over, and there were immigrant workers in the fields, or it could have been in Mexico, but the response was de nada, which in Spanish meant it's okay, you're welcome. But who produced that food? Let's think about that. Who doesn't have food today? Who is struggling with the basics that we take for granted? And again, trying to think in a more global humanity way. If we're fortunate, that's great, and be happy for it, and be thankful for it. But thankful in the sense that you realize that you're pretty lucky in the global scheme of things, and probably it has more. Somebody once said that the most important decision a person makes is deciding who his parents are, and I think that's a lot of what we're dealing with here. So let's quit thinking of ourselves as being extra special and think of ourselves as part of a larger humanity.
Exactly. And excuse me, to add to that, I just like to encourage people, get out and travel, go to other countries, see how people are living, and
True.
what can you do? What can we do as humans to support one another, to come together, as opposed to look at all the things that we don't have. I'm grateful for this, I'm grateful for that. Some people don't have running water, they don't have clean water, they don't have food. And on this Thanksgiving, there is so much to be thankful for. As I say, Thanksgiving to me is every day. Every day I have things to be thankful for.
Absolutely.
So, Don Sawyer, I'm thankful that I met you, and I really appreciate your time and the work that you're doing. And I can envision some collaborations potentially with us. So I'll be reaching out, but I'm going to spotlight you one more time. Who's a good client for you, and who would you like to reach out to? How do they do it?
A client in the sense of a purchaser who would buy?
No, team human. Team human.
Oh, team human. Wow. Yeah. Well, okay. I'll just say one thing. That I'm reading this book by a guy who I really have a lot of respect for. Our Tribal Futures. He's a biologist at the University of Toronto, and the subtitle is "How to Channel Our Foundational Human Instincts into a Force for Good," and that's that. It's to me that. And I'm reading what he's saying, and also Hayakawa wrote a book, Fuji, and he was it's called Identity, and I think what we're all wrestling with is this idea of identity. But if we can, and identity is individual, sure, and it's group, it's collective. But if we can expand that identity out to be more and more inclusive, that is to me what the challenge is. And Dawkins said the same thing, that evolution really is a matter of widening the circle of people that we love and care about. And I think that's kind of where we're at.
Great way to sum up the show today and to leave people with hope and inspiration. Don, do come back and see us again in the future, and wish you all the best with everything that you're doing. You are truly a humanitarian making a difference in this world. Well,
thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. Jacalyn, it was a lot of fun.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun. See you again soon, hopefully. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Please do reach out to Don. All of his contact information is there in the notes. And again, whether you're watching on the live or the replay or listening on a podcast, we're here to support each other. We're here to leave a legacy of kindness, compassion, and empathy. That's what we stand for here. It's all about global education, hope, and inspiration. Thank you for joining us on The Wise Ones. Our next show is coming up. It's the Film and Music Show starring Dr. Madeline Chan. So do wait for that. We'll be back momentarily. Let's hear a message from our sponsor. Bye for now. USA Global TV and Radio proudly presents our partner and sponsor, Mr. Philip Sykes and the British School of Excellence. Building confidence, changing lives. And now, proudly presenting The Polished Professional.
On a transformative journey with the British School of Excellence's comprehensive suite of masterclasses, crafted to elevate your professional and personal life. 8 outstanding modules will elevate you to the next level. Module 1, Exploring Life's Purpose, delves into the depths of self-discovery, guiding you to chart your unique path to fulfillment and success. Module 2, Mastering Professional Presence and Confidence. This masterclass is a deep dive into the art of self-assurance and commanding presence, which is essential for standing out in today's competitive landscape. Module 3, Learn the Secrets of Visual Impact, how to curate a personal style that amplifies your professional brand. Module 4, Mastering Professional Etiquette and Communication Excellence, navigating the nuances of corporate interaction with grace and tact. Module 5, Elegance in Eloquence. We impart powerful techniques to captivate and persuade any audience with your oratory skills. Module 6, Unlock the Potential of Your Emotional Intelligence, EQ, and harness the ability to connect, empathize, and lead with emotional savvy. Module 7, Mastering DISC, building a gateway to understanding behavioral styles, fostering better personal and professional relationships. Module 8, Mastery in Dining Etiquette, building your confidence to perfect the subtleties of dining with finesse, enhancing your social savviness at any table. Step into the Polished Professional program where poise, elegance, and excellence aren't just taught, they're instilled for life. Join us to redefine your potential and polish your professional edge.
To learn more, go to thebritishschoolofexcellence.com. The British School of Excellence are investors in people. Let us invest in you. 5 little known secrets for dementia caregivers with Tracy Cram-Perkins.
Hi there, I am Tracy Cram-Perkins, the host of the Dementia Home Care Show here on USA Global TV and Radio. I am also the author of the book of the same name. And you'll see this QR code. This is for an extended version of the same talk. So if you want to see the full hour-long version, feel free to scan the code and go to that website. Stick with me. We'll talk about 5 little known secrets to make it a little easier to do dementia caregiving. What you're seeing on the left-hand side is a healthy aged brain, age 55 and above. The one you're seeing on the right is an Alzheimer's disease brain. It is in moderate disease. It is shrinking. It has holes in it. The memories that were in those holes no longer exist. When you're learning something, let's say in kindergarten, you learn how to tie your shoelace. Well, then by the time you're in 2nd grade, your brain remembers that information from tying the shoelace and applies it so you can learn more quickly how to tie more complex knots. So the brain is hardwired to do this for us. So it helps us learn faster so it doesn't take us long to acquire knowledge. The brain is looking for the information and they pick the closest to wherever that hole is. Let's look at some tips that we can use to help do that.
These are 5 simple tools you can use as a dementia caregiver to help your loved one. The whiteboard is a useful tool in recording the day's activities and the answers to repetitive questions. The calendar clock is a very useful tool to orient your loved one on the day, the date, and the time, and remind them of upcoming appointments. The communication cards are a great tool to bridge the gap when they can no longer tell you what's wrong. And then there's the pill minder, for when your loved one is still able to take pills but needs prompting. The final tool I want to share with you is the memory book. It tells your loved one's story. It's a great tool for distraction, redirection, also as a conversation starter, and telling you where they are in their story so you know how to answer their questions.
Music is probably the most powerful tool in your toolbox after laughter. Music is a way to maintain connection. It sticks with your brain longer than any other thing, including reading. When you're having an issue with somebody, you can play their favorite music if you move them to another room, something that makes them happy, or you can start singing songs together from their childhood. These are some of my favorite books for caregivers. My show airs on the 3rd Tuesday of every month, and you can view past episodes on YouTube. Thank you, everyone.
This program has been brought to you in part by Tracy Cram Perkins. Connect with her and order her book at tracycramperkins.com. For more information about Alzheimer's disease, support resources, and how you can help, contact the Alzheimer's Association at 1-800-272-3900 or visit their website at www.alz.org. They offer 24/7 helpline support and a wealth of information to assist you and your loved ones.